Australian and US government cybersecurity agencies are warning that common website and app vulnerabilities can lead to large-scale data breaches. Emerging technologies are making it easy for hackers to access and tweak sensitive data due to a lack of security checks. Well, joining me live is Phil Goldie, Vice President and Managing Director of Okta, the world's leading identity company. Thank you so much, Phil, for joining us. Yes, this topic is not going anywhere, of course. What is the current cyber threat landscape in Australia like at the moment?
Yeah, thanks, Janie. Look, it's fair to say it's evolving and it's continuing to gather pace. It's something that's pretty complex, certainly for boards and for companies to deal with. I think if you think about why that is, Australians are pretty attractive targets globally. We're generally considered to be a prosperous nation, high net worth individuals, companies doing well. So, we are definitely seen as a target globally. We're also a nation of people that are, online more. At Okta, we've just done some research that shows that typically around the world, people have about 20 different identities on average across different sites and apps. And in Australia, that's a lot higher. So we're a very digital nation. So those two factors make us a really appealing target globally. And then I think if you look at the rise in attacks that Australian businesses are dealing with, it's growing continuously. About 12 months ago now, the Australian Cybersecurity Centre said that they'd had reported 76,000 different breaches and attacks in the country, and that's just the ones that I think are known about and the ones that have been reported. So that's one about every 7 minutes, and that we expect, I think, over the last 12 months would have risen again when the numbers come out. So it's definitely a challenging area. And then, the final aspect is just the sophistication. I mean, these organisations, these global networks are very sophisticated. They run like big businesses. They have CEOs, CFOs, chief marketing officers in some instances. So they run like big organisations. And the attacks are becoming more and more sophisticated as well. So attacks like phishing, which many organisations are focused on, really challenging, becoming much more sophisticated. And then you get the virtuous loop where we see these big scale data breaches here in Australia. The details that get stolen from those go on to fuel other sorts of attacks around the world. So it's definitely a threat landscape that's evolving. It's becoming more complex, and it's definitely a challenge for Australians.
So I guess it's not really a matter of if, it's when, isn't it, in terms of being hacked?
It is, yeah. I mean, the industry would tell you that you're either an organisation that has been hacked or you just don't know it yet, and I think that's definitely true. We see that talking to a lot of customers. There's a real heightened sense of focus now, which I think is good. That's definitely coming from the board level down. There's a lot of focus on this, and so yes, it's definitely a big threat.
So, in terms of board levels, what responsibility do organisations have from a board level?
Well, ultimately, I mean, the board is there to manage risk, and this is definitely an emerging area of high risk. And so, the buck stops, I guess, with the board there. Ultimately, it's the executives that have to deal with the day-to-day implementation of the right sort of technologies and policies and other things. But the accountability for the governance of that definitely sits at the board level. There's a lot of commentary on that. There's a lot of expectation on the board. Darren Goldie has come out and been, vocal on that, I think, quite rightly. But I think boards have made progress, in the last couple of years. But ultimately, it's about managing organisational risk, and that sits with the board, fairly and squarely.
And tell us about some of the technology. I know that Okta's solutions are based on Zero Trust, for example. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so Zero Trust is essentially saying, how do we move to an environment where we don't trust anything or anyone until we explicitly have to, and we can guarantee who they are, and we only trust them for the period of time that you need access to that sort of information. So many organisations are starting to move along that journey of Zero Trust now. It's a good example of a technology topic that's crossing over into the board. It's becoming a board discussion. And so many organisations are on that journey, which I think is a good thing.
All right. And in terms of the gap with boards, like what kind of practical skills do people need to learn?
Yeah, if you look first of all at why we've got the skills gap that we have, I think a lot of boards have been constructed, over the sort of history of corporate Australia from people that have spent long periods as CEO. They've spent time in areas like finance and M&A and legal. And so those are the skills that have typically made up board composition. But now there are new areas that boards are dealing with. I mean, outside of technology, ESG is a good example of a very emergent area that boards are focused on. Cyber and technology is another one. And so, I think the makeup of boards needs to be looked at. And, we need to have a clear point of view in terms of what that will look like going forward. I think, some practical things I think that boards should start to do. Assessing skills. A lot of boards go through assessments of the skills that make up the board. I think looking at that through the lens of cybersecurity and thinking about the next 2 to 3 to 5 years. Making sure you're looking at the right reporting and metrics at the board level that suggest that the organisation is as secure as it can be and it's making progress in that space. I sit on the board of CMRI, the Children's Medical Research Institute. We've done things like cyber simulations, which have been really useful, I think, in raising just the awareness of the gaps that we have and helping to put really practical steps in place. And then maybe finally the establishment of a digital advisory or a cyber advisory committee reporting to the board, can really allow boards to bring outside-in experience, industry experience. And in our industry, there are plenty of people that really want to get involved and help to boards across the country. So, lots of practical things I think boards are really starting to make progress on.
Yeah, and while you're on that topic, you are on that board. You mentioned, of course, we've got Genes for Genes Day coming up on Friday, August 4. Do you want to give them a bit of a shout out?
Yeah. I mean, CMRI is such a fantastic organisation. There's so much great research to help, childhood illness. Genes for Genes, very famous brand. It's this Friday, so encourage people to get to the website, get involved, and get some sponsorship.
Yeah, fantastic. And let's talk about AI as well, because how does that pose a threat to cybersecurity?
Yeah, I mean, AI, in many ways, it's such a hot topic. It reminds me in some ways of what we saw early on in public cloud and, this kind of really emergent technology that offers so much promise. We have seen, many examples of where intellectual property from organisations has been exploited and exposed through AI. So, again, it comes down to managing risk, I think, and boards really leaning in to say, what are the practical uses for AI in the organisation, and how can we, before we start off on that journey, how can we be sure of the risk that's involved and take a balanced approach? So, balancing the enthusiasm, I think, with a level of risk assessment.